All right, we are live. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to we're doing another live interview here for NFT 365. Of course, today, episode 244 just went live. So, fun interview with NFT Ignition, who was one of the founders of Fame Lady Squad, as well as she's been involved in, I think, 29 different NFT projects that she said. So, it's definitely a great episode to check it out. It is live in your podcasting apps as we try to drop every morning at 11:11 a.m. And we got a fun one for you today. This will be Friday's episode of the podcast. And we're gonna, for those that are jumping in, I'm gonna jump in and record, but I will be able to see your comments as you share them live. We are streaming on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on YouTube, and of course out on Twitter as well. So if you want to share your thoughts, feel free to do so. And if you have to jump out, I know everyone can't stay for like the whole video. It will be on YouTube as well as living in all of the podcasting apps. So just search for NFT 365. So before we're going to go ahead and get started on the recording. Welcome back to another episode of NFT 365. And, we are sponsored by the Crypto Business Conference. Crypto Business Conference is happening in San Diego, beautiful San Diego, on October 9th through the 11th. Make sure to check that out. I look forward to seeing everyone there. And, on this journey of NFTs in this, beautiful world of, where we're all kind of taking a lot of the things that, I've been talking about here on the podcast, to me, the advantage of a lot of my, when I look at Web3 as a whole, I've said this before, I look at this as like the intersection in my career and in my background that I didn't know was coming, that I didn't even know really was possible. And the beauty of it is it's really about that, harmony between technology and humanity. And, I'm one that, I founded the ADHD coin, of course, over on Rally. We founded that almost 19 months ago. And I am someone that is neurodiverse. And of course, we talk about that a lot here on the podcast and kind of tapping into like, the mental health angle and kind of understanding, where our roles are. And I have to say, like, for people that don't know me and as much, personally, and maybe you're discovering the podcast, like my full-time gig, of course, is as a keynote speaker. I get to speak, at stages around the world. And I always say that, speaking to me is the second place that I am most zen in the world, where my brain is the calmest. It's where I feel really like my ADHD almost kind of, disappears in the background. I'm able to tap into a lot of the things that, really make, in my opinion, make ADHD my superpower. And the number one place where I am most zen, which I know doesn't make a lot of sense to a lot of people, is actually sitting at a poker table with a lot of money on the line and playing cards for sometimes 18 hours in a row. And that's why for this episode it's gonna be a lot of fun. That I'm bringing in two friends that are actually the founders of CryptoHoldemNFT, which, if you are paying attention to us minting an NFT every single day for 365 days, they were actually the project we minted back on episode or number 106, which is it's pretty cool to kind of bring this full circle. And I've been in contact with Joe over the months and getting to know the project and a lot of the things that are kind of happening kind of across the board as far as NFTs and things are going. So excited to bring in both Josh and Joe from Crypto Holdem NFT. Josh, I'll kick it over to you first. Go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell the audience a little about yourself, and then we'll kick it over to Joe and we'll jump into the conversation.
Definitely. Thanks, man. Super excited to be here and really excited to join you guys and get to talk to your audience a little bit here about what we're doing. So my name's Josh Wilson. I was born and raised in Boston, Massachusetts, spent some time out in Los Angeles, and now reside in Nashville, Tennessee. And I'm the chief operating officer for Crypto Holdem. So my background prior to getting into the Web3 and NFT space was very much in business development, sales, very traditional kind of Web2 world. I worked for IKEA for a long time, designing and building stores, traveling around the country and traveling around the world doing that. And then got into the Web3 crypto NFT space with Top Shot, like a lot of us did, being a sports fan and a degenerate gambler. Got in there with Top Shot, and then it was really just, we were hooked. A couple buddies, I played in a a poker game with some friends over the pandemic, throughout COVID, played in like a Zoom poker game, which has kind of reignited my love for poker. Had kind of gotten away from the game, played a lot in the, Rounders era, late 90s, early 2000s. I'm 43 years old. So played a lot in that era. And then, was living in LA during the pandemic and was really locked down and couldn't do much. So got back into poker, and then kind of as my love for poker, kick back in, there comes my, introduction to the NFT space. And then it was just game over. And now I work full-time in the space by day, and then do CryptoHoldemNFT by night. So I am all in, as they say, to use the poker pun. And yeah, that's my story.
It won't be the last poker pun. I can pretty much guarantee that's the that is the case for sure. Love that, Josh. And I'm gonna tap into a couple of things that you said after we get Joe's intro. Joe, over to you. What say you?
Every time we get introduced on a podcast or anything like that, Josh always has to bring up Top Shot. And obviously Josh and I started in this space with NFT Top Shot. I think I bought it at the all-time high. So every time Josh brings that up, it's always, I get a little cringe. But again, Joe Cameron, I'm the CEO of Crypto Holdem. Prior to this, I was a law enforcement officer in California for 11 years, born and raised in Massachusetts. So that's where Josh and I kind of connected with our love over the Patriots and every single Boston sports team. So sorry, Fanzo. Diehard Patriots fans on your podcast. We didn't let you know beforehand, but
I know that's pretty good job sandbagging that. That's impressive.
Yeah, we're doing you like that live.
But yeah, so that's kind of a little bit of background before me. And then obviously, like I said, with Josh, we got in with NBA Top Shot and our love for poker and really wanted to be, I think, one of the things you've said over and over in your podcast is collect before you become a founder. And I can tell you right now, Josh and I collected a lot. And, we learned the space, and then, we combined poker and, the Web3 space, and we're loving every minute of it.
I love it. Yeah, definitely that, it's that collector side. I also feel like I'm the buy at the top of Top Shot side of the house, Joe. So we're very much aligned there. Like I was like, I've always done heavy, like, in DraftKings and fantasy football was, massive, but like as Top Shot was kind of taking off, I kept sitting back, and then I finally pulled the trigger. And of course it was pretty much at the top on that as well, which is, I actually got to share the stage with one of the guys from the NBA that kind of brought a lot of that together. And it was so funny because he's like, there was like a LinkedIn message that I wanted to jump on the phone with you. And like, so now I have that like saved where it was like, Brian, check your LinkedIn messages, because it probably would have saved me some thousands of dollars when it comes to Top Shot investments. So crypto, Crypto Holdem, from a standpoint of, an NFT project, for me, one of the things that, it jumped on my radar kind of originally was just the idea that I was like, man, this space needs a poker project. But I also was like, how does that like look or appear in this space? And I remember the kind of my very first kind of like looking into the project and was like, wait a second, like I love like the approach to what the project is. So we're going to talk we'll talk about poker. We'll talk a little bit about like the space, community building, and some of the lessons learned. But I would love, Joe, give me a little bit of like that origin story of like, hey, like, and first off, thank you for your service as a law enforcement officer and keeping us safe. Much love in that space, even for Patriots fans as a diehard Pittsburgh fan. Although I give people in Boston a lot of credit because I just like fans that are diehard, right? Like, let's face it, there's not a lot of cities. I lived in Arizona for 9 years. My daughters were born there. There was more Steeler jerseys at non-Steeler Arizona Cardinal games than there were Arizona Cardinal fans. Like, that's a little shot at Arizona Cardinals, but like it's such a, I love diehard fans. And so talk to me a little bit about like that origin of like, hey, we're, the having an NFT project around poker, and then kind of some of that initial kind of thought on it. Because for me, I think I thought of like, hey, there needs to be a poker NFT, but I hadn't like wrapped my head around what it would look like. And I love what you guys did as an approach. And I'd love to hear a little bit about that origin story.
Yeah. So, the origin started with Josh and I playing poker, and he can probably speak a little bit more on this because he was really the brains behind this with, his poker home games and stuff like that. But how we, really went from the collector space and combined it. And there was a study that was done. Josh, you can fill me in on the study that was done for where they were talking about how it's the integration between crypto and the poker world. And then we're like, well, why not NFTs, right? Just like you said, we haven't seen one out there. There was a few, but, we wanted to, Josh and I are also big case break guys. We're big sports card collectors. So we were like, okay, how can we get into that concept and kind of, gamify the aspect a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think to build on that, like I said, kind of top of the call, we all really, I mean, a lot of people got back into poker, especially online poker, right during the pandemic, right? So that we're not unique in that regard, but so the ideation process for the project, as we became really fascinated with the space and put in our 40, 60, 80 hours of research and collecting and really kind of being in the trenches on a line level and on a customer level of this thing for months and months and months before we ever even thought of building a project. It was probably 6 to 8 months of collecting. Probably a little too much, as Joe said. We're all gamblers here, that's why we're all friends, right? And a lot of case breaking. I lived in Hermosa Beach at the time, and there was Jaspy's was at the bottom of my street, which is like super dangerous.
Yeah, that would be so dangerous. Oh my goodness.
And they stayed open during the pandemic for curbside orders. Just shout out to Jaspy's for taking all the money. But so casing, case breaking with them, Steel City Case Breaks, those guys in Pittsburgh, great guys. So like. Yep. So, just we're doing a ton of that. And a couple of buddies, Scott Blumstein is one, Scotty won the WSOP main event a couple of years back. And
yeah. Oh, yeah.
It was really Scott and my buddy, Joe Stapleton, who both got me into, we were like playing on a Zoom run it with some other friends with Maria Ho and some other people. Right. And we're playing on this online game and the guys are talking about, there's an NBA Top Shot, that's kind of how Top Shot. And almost jokingly, Scotty said to Stapes, don't tell Josh about NFTs because he's gonna go bananas on it, right? I'm like, wait, what's an NFT? What are you talking about? Literally had never even heard of it before, and they were right because anything worth doing is worth overdoing is my personal mantra. So, we got into it. So super deep dive, just instantly became obsessed with the nostalgia of like the new internet. I mean, I to take it way back in the late 90s, I worked at CompUSA and sold computers, so I was an IT guy. It was kind of my first love, and then the real world takes over and kind of got out of that world and ended up in retail and customer service. But so I always really enjoyed and had a lot of love for IT. So kind of hit on that point, the whole case break, the sweat of minting a project. So anyway, fast forward to Joe and I started kicking ideas back and forth on, we both love poker. We've got a lot of friends who are in that world and can help us. My good buddy Maria Ho was an integral part of the ideation and rollout of this project. She's a good friend and was incredibly important in that process. So having a Hall of Famer, in Maria and guys like Stapes and Scotty to be able to bounce ideas off of, it was just too good to not do it, right? And those guys were all of our friends were all so helpful in helping us ideate this thing, get it rolled out, and make sure we're staying true to the game. And that's how we ended up here.
I love that. And I have a cool little Maria Ho story is like, my first World Series of poker that I played was 2010, I believe 2000. I have like the coin somewhere. I think it was 2010. And, I had won some, I had played a lot in Atlantic City, done a couple of WSOPs, had actually placed third in the Arizona State Championship and kind of bankrolled that into my first WSOP. And I remember I sat down at the table and, I was like literally that first WSOP event where just everything felt like magnitude that I wasn't even, close to prepared to. I could sit down at a 5-10, no limit table without even, hesitating. But all of a sudden it was the, WSOP. And I remember it was the second break on that the day that I was playing. And I was like over, kind of talking to somebody, and Maria came over and she's like, hey, I just want to let you know, like, take some deep breaths. And I was like, I looked at her and I was like, she wasn't at my table. And I was like, and she's like, one of my friends is over the table. I've been checking over there. And she's like, and I can feel your nerves here. And I remember it being like, wait a second. Like, I of course knew who she was. And I'm like, just the fact that she had like the fact that she told me that and kind of gave me that. I remember sitting back at that table and feeling like so much more like alive, right? It was like all of a sudden, like, it was kind of like that off my back. Of course, it was probably an hour later, I flopped trip deuces and got knocked out pretty quickly right after that. As the board ran out and my deuces didn't hold, and that was my first WSOP out. But like I remember going back the second year and being like, I need to just go back over and like thank her for that, right? And it was such a important aspect for me. And so that's even when I had saw she was kind of you were kind of talking about her art through the project, and I love that she's a good friend. And the other part I wanted to kind of tap in, you were talking about case breaking and card collecting and poker, and I think for a lot of us, like for me, I played poker, I'm 41, so I think we're right around that same. I played through college, like before, of course, Holdem was really the game. And then Moneymaker, of course, made it a lot different of a conversation. And for me, that was such an exciting time. And, and then I was, very lucky. I actually signed a poker sponsorship with an online poker brand that weirdly was not great for me because I was a horrible online poker player. Like, I mean, I am talking about as horrible as you could actually get at online, mainly because I knew that my skill set in person was reading people, being a people person. I was really good at trusting my gut, having that hyper focus. And so it was always funny because like they would introduce me as like, a guy that was, let's just say as the guy that was like the only millennial that really sucks at online poker. Like literally that was like my reputation. And so like, I love like that like whole world. And I ended up splitting a place in Vegas for a while, flying from Arizona to Vegas every other weekend for a good while and playing. And for me, like I share this a lot. And I think the context is important. Like I've read more books, studied and analyzed more on poker than I have anything in my entire career. No job, no background, like, and there's something about like this, like the art of poker that is so similar to the NFT space. And it ties Josh like into what you mentioned as well, is in the sense of like my friends, when we were on Clubhouse, they're like, Fanzo, do not get into NFTs. Like, cause I was like, I didn't really like crypto because crypto felt to me very like, financial currency playing. And I was like, I got plenty of other places to play, but NFTs being dropped in my lap was of course a big deal in like that world. And Joe, I'm curious from your side, like when you not only NFTs kind of getting dropped in your world, but you're kind of connecting it to the poker side. What was kind of like some of that aha for you in that initial kind of, being involved in the project and then what you guys could kind of bring to life?
Yeah, for me, it was obviously Josh and Josh played a lot, probably a little bit more than me during, the pandemic when we started out. And, we found this study, and I'm blanking on the study, Josh, if you can help me out with it. But, we found, a study where they brought poker players were so heavily influenced or into the crypto market. And Josh and I are, like you said, we're buying these NFTs, we're case breaking, and we're like, I think we probably, it was on a Sunday after some football, so after some nice cocktails, and we're like, well, why don't we just combine this, right? Why can't we bring a poker project into this Web3 space? And then we just started, brainstorming ideas and everything like that. And that's really how it came about. I wish we had a better story of us, whiteboarding this big, thing like you have on the back behind you. And it's like, no, this came after probably a Patriots football Sunday. And
well, we can call that like a spoiled football Sunday for you guys because Patriots have been living a great life there. And I like to say Brady has I've cried more in a vehicle thanks to Brady driving home from Pittsburgh games, as a season ticket holder of the Steelers, and especially those early days. And so I love that, but I actually love the fact that it wasn't like this major whiteboarding session, right? Because I think some people's their vision of projects or projects that come to life, because I think for me when I first discovered the project, I remember being like, hey, this isn't like some of the other poker projects that had come before. And it's no offense to them, but like a lot of them were kind of building in the like, if you sneeze a project out, you could sell it out, kind of era, right? Where there wasn't a lot of design or focus, or even, like I've always, I don't know how you guys feel about like poker movies, but like the fact that they don't do a great job of like researching like the basics, right? Like in like even like some of the terminology, like I was so afraid like the poker NFT space would be a little bit like that, where you're like, yeah, there's a Fifth Street there, right? Like, that there's supposed to be five, like like, and sometimes in these movies you feel like they miss like the most basic of basic things. So I'm curious, Josh, like in that side and like, playing poker with, thanks to the pandemic, poker being kind of integrated into some of the NFTs, early on. I remember CryptoDads, one of the first, events they announced was a poker tournament. I was like, oh, that's a no brainer. Like, a bunch of us playing online. And, but I'm curious, like, as you guys were bringing it to life and kind of to bring it to, to like minting and putting out there, what were the kind of the projects that maybe influenced, or that, and you mentioned, case breaking and some of like the Top Shot, card collecting. Were there any other projects that kind of like gamification and like kind of jumped out at what you guys were thinking of as far as like style or things that kind of influence, the kind of the vision of the project?
Yeah, you mentioned so as far as in the NFT space, not really, right? I mean, especially when we launched, there weren't really any really poker projects to speak of. I mean, our friends in poker, right? Maria, and that's a really cool story about Maria, and one I know she'll really appreciate to hear. Maria is one of the most thoughtful people on the planet, so that's not at all surprising to hear that from 3 tables away. She's realize you're having a hard time. Maria is one of those people. You mentioned that you like something, you like a particular tequila, and then 3 months later you have a house party and she shows up with whatever the nicest bottle of that tequila is. She's just an incredibly thoughtful human. So, I mean, really, it was guys like, again, guys, just buddies like Maria and Stapes and Blumstein, and mostly Maria, to be candid, just making sure that we're staying true to the game, right? And Maria was so important in the early stages of this project in that regard. And you mentioned movies, like, to give Stapes a shout out, like Stapes consulted on the movie The Card Counter, right? So,
oh, nice.
Which is why The Card Counter, if you've ever seen it, right?
Oh, yes.
Great poker movie.
Yes.
One of the only good poker movies of the last 20 years, in my humble opinion. And they hired Stapes to consult on that to make sure they weren't saying exactly like nobody were things that you would never hear at a poker table, right? So,
right.
But that said, in the NFT space in general, CryptoDads, we're buddies. One of our, Kenny Sanders, who was a founder at the beginning of the project, who ended up stepping away to focus on some other business ventures. Kenny, Kenny, myself, and Joe, and the guys at CryptoDads were a big help and a big influence. We've been big fans of their project. We all minted. We're all part of their mints. Yep. So CryptoDads is probably the first project I really got into as far as community goes, and really saw what a community could be. So they very much influence how we built our community, right? And yep. Kind of showed us what good looks like. But from a gameplay and a utility standpoint, humbly speaking, I mean, we really kind of created that. I mean, so there wasn't that didn't exist really. And we definitely, like to Joe's point, took a lot from, that McKinsey was the study that Joe's referencing about the adoption rate and all that. So we've got some folks that I play poker with that work over there in their sports and gaming division. So, nice. We consulted with McKinsey on it, again, on a friendly level, not on a professional level, because consulting with McKinsey professionally is
cost you some money there.
No, those pockets go a little deeper than ego. So we're very fortunate to have some really smart people who don't mind spending an hour on the phone with us to ask silly questions. But so that was really, but yeah, CryptoDads was definitely a big one. And then Ethereum Towers, early on, I mean, they've been such unbelievable partners and friends to us. And, they were the first big project that when we were, nobody had ever heard. I'm not that we're, V friends or something now, but back when really nobody had ever heard of us, they were the first group of guys and gals to look at us and go, yeah, no, this makes sense. These guys are legit. They're doxed, and we'll help promote and kind of partner and get, spread the word on this project. They were our first kind of major collab. So CryptoDads and Ethereum Towers, definitely the two that stand out for me.
I love that we have that CryptoDads, kind of like that was one of the ones for me that, like, just the community, I was like, wait a second, like this is much more than just the flipping and the, and there was something beautiful about that, like, time frame of CryptoDads. I think that was also kind of a very influential, right? Like it was a time where, I think we were, like, projects were starting to figure out, like, there needs to be more than just having like a clubhouse room or just being, getting a bunch of people in a Discord. I will say, I'm curious, Joe, I remember, pre-launch, and you guys were doing the kind of the countdown, and I was excited. I will say, like, not only as a poker fan, but this was 100 mints into buying an NFT every day, and I felt like, hey, I'm dialing this in. I'm starting to get a better understanding of projects that I believe, have the longevity that I was looking for. And it was funny. It wasn't until the night before that it kind of dawned on me that there was like this element of, and I'm not really sure. I have to go back and look. Maybe it was a podcast episode the night before your mint, but it hit me and was like, wait a second, like this project might have a niche, like the fact that, like, first, like, do you have to be a poker player to collect this NFT? And like, it was one of those ahas, like, wow, this would be really powerful, but it also be really limiting as far as like people that want to embrace it or get in or understand kind of like that value. Can you talk a little bit about, like, did you guys kind of think about that, like, beforehand, or like what that kind of looked like? Because, like, to me, I remember I was racing to like, make sure to grab one, initially. I took a step back, and I'm also a co-founder of Meta Athletes, and Meta Athletes we had the very similar in the sense of like we were looking at high performance athletes, and we realized, wow, like that's a much smaller niche inside of a small niche, which is NFTs as a whole. How did you guys kind of look at that like kind of ahead of time, and like what were your kind of thoughts there at launch around like, wow, although poker players live in this space, like you are like kind of a niche within a niche as far as a project kind of launching?
Yeah, one of the key processes that we went through was that we were not going to go to any of the big shill Twitter, Instagram pages. That was something Josh, Ken, and I early on said, hey, listen, that's not what this project is. Just like you explained, like this is a niche market that we're going to. We're trying to bring the NFT space to the poker world. So that was our number one thing we were not going to do from the beginning. So right out the gate, again, going back to CryptoDads, we're probably the first that said, hey, let's do these poker tournaments, right? So we're like, okay, let's have these weekly poker tournaments where we can give away a whitelist spot, we can give away a mint, and we can start getting more eyes on our project. Just go back to your last point, what we were thinking at the very beginning was there was project out there, the PFPs were big, right? And we're like, I think to answer Josh's question earlier, I think case breaks was it, right? Case breaks for us was like, how do we take case breaks, get them into the Web3 space and kind of gamify this? And that's where we were like, hey, we're going to be the first to use your NFT in a totally different way. So not only are we bringing the poker world to this, but we're going to allow you to actually use your NFT in a gameplay aspect. And then we're going to kind of get on the sweat in the gambling side of just like, how do you use that? How do you play? How do you gamify? So I think that was the big thing for us. But, to be completely candid, when we started this, like I said, I've been a police officer for 11 years. I've started 2 companies. This is hands down the hardest thing I've ever done. Like this is, it's really hard. Now,
because I mean, not only from the police officer side, right, but like, the business side, when you think about it being hard from a, I think, your project has adapted. Like I remember, like for me, I loved the idea that the NFT, for those that haven't seen it, we'll include a link to, of course, the website. We'll even include a link to the tweet where we tweeted out back on February 25th when we minted ours, and we had suited 5-7 of diamonds was our cards there. I remember, like, to me, I love the idea of kind of like the peel, right? And it feels very, the hand coming out and being, it has like a very interesting, like the feel makes really aligned with the poker side of the house, but it isn't like your traditional PFP, what you're going to see someone put as much as their profile photo. What aspects of like that, like when you say like, it's one of the hardest, business, because I think this is such an important thing for people to wrap their head around, because, even the projects that like are launching as like a quote unquote freemium and getting out there, like I think so many people are right now getting a slap in the face of like, holy hell, is this a lot harder and a lot more entailed than like we maybe realized. So like, Joe, I'm curious, like what were some of the things that have jumped out at you kind of making this space a little bit either more difficult or kind of the moving parts that kind of step out that I think most people probably need to wrap their head around?
Yeah, I think we'll probably talk a lot about CryptoDads here. I think they did their project at the great time, right? And they minted out, and it was, at the perfect time. And we were in it. We were talking with them, and I think going back to the art and how it was a little bit different. The artist is John Gagnon, and I went to college. We've both been to Plymouth State up in New Hampshire, and I knew John was a really good artist. And one thing that Josh and I wanted from the beginning was we wanted to personally know the artist. We wanted some personal feelings behind this art. So, we kind of just let John do his thing and said, hey, this is the idea that we have. This is the concept we want to go with. And he built he built some great characteristics and great traits that we built into this thing. But the whole community building and getting your project out into this space is, we were guided down some roads that we probably would change if we had to change them again. And, we started doing a little bit of marketing on Twitter and stuff like that, but just getting our project out to the poker world was a lot harder than we thought. And to go back to your point about this niche market, like we had this idea that we're going to bring this poker project and all these poker players were going to play, and we're going to put a seat to the World Series of Poker. And the candid answer to that is it's really hard. It's just really hard to do.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny you say that. I would throw in real quick, like I remember like before this was pre-mint, I still have a text group with a bunch of the people that I've played poker with over the years, right? And we always like, especially right now, like kind of the summertime World Series of Poker time, we're always kind of like, hey, did you see this? And we're sharing like bad beat videos and such. And I remember sharing a link to your project right away. And I was like, oh, like I can get my people into NFTs. Like it was like one of those like moments of like, oh, this is like the in. And I remember like the replies of like completely confused on like what that even meant. And then I was like, well, I'll help you get a wallet. And I remember I was like, I'll do a Zoom call. And then people are like, but now I'm going to have, it was kind of a shock to me, like even as someone that was like excited, because I'm always looking for projects, that kind of bring people in as well. The mint price was also, I believe it was 0.2. Is that correctly? If I remember correct, I think it was, 0.2 on mint day, which, this is January, February timeframe, right? Where ETH is at a little higher of a point. But I will say, like, I felt like your marketing and some of the, we could say guerrilla tactics, but like I really liked the idea that you were, doing some massive giveaways around like whoever minted a certain, 2 cards in their NFT. I thought there was some real creativity there that like for me I was taking notes, and like even though if it might not have like kind of moved the needle maybe as much as that they probably would have thought it would have done, I think a lot of that had to do with where the market was at, where ETH was at. And I also think like that February March timeframe, I think we'll look back at such an interesting space where where were people thinking about liquidity. We had a lot of projects that were all of a sudden like minting at 0.8 and 0.9 or 1.5 ETH and I kind of draining the market as well. Josh, I'm curious, like, when you look at that, like kind of the rollout and the project and what you guys have kind of grown and learned, what are some of the things that like, I'd say like either like lessons or things that you're excited that this worked and because you've been building, for those that don't know, like your community is very strong and you guys have a lot of people that are, all in. In the Discord, I've always appreciated that, there are people having active conversations without anyone on the team having to be in there, right? Which to me is like a sign of a good community. But Josh, what are some of your thoughts on that? Like kind of like that rollout and some things that you're like, hey, like what we're building, yes, the poker players might not have been there yet, but like we really did a couple of these things well, and some things that we would have, thought that we probably might have changed or did a little differently.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned the niche within a niche within a niche thing. So I'll say there are probably the number one thing I'm glad we did, and Joe hit on it or alluded to it a little bit earlier, is this this is right, fall 2020, spring 21. This is at the peak of the boom, right, when we're going through our ideation process. And the ad NFT, charging 20, 30, 40, 50K to shill, and selling projects out, right? Just because people didn't realize that they were being sold projects that were sponsored. But anyway, that's a different story. They ended up getting shut down for that. But
rightfully so.
Rightfully so. Yeah, 100%. So we dodged that bullet, which is good. And that's really important. I think, the number one thing I'd say, like Gary always says, right, at least 6 months to build a community, right? I would agree with that. And we pushed our launch date back twice. And we did that because once internally and once externally. And we did that because we just felt like we weren't ready, right? And frankly, if we had gone with November, we were going to launch during the, they moved WSOP that year to October, November. We were going to launch at the end of, there's this huge hunger for, it's right now, right? I mean, there's this huge hunger post WSOP and this huge void in the poker news world of what's going on. So the initial plan was to launch immediately following WSOP. And there were some things we uncovered in our gameplay and stuff like that. We could have went with it 100%. We would have sold a lot more units, probably, frankly, made a lot more money if we did. We did it because we wanted to hammer those things out. So I'm glad we did all that. We got good advice and we got some not great advice, right, from a number of different folks who will remain nameless to protect the innocent. But I mean, the biggest thing is, and Joe hit on it earlier, this is like same thing. I've started companies, I've exited companies, I've built 400,000 square foot retail stores, with managing 1,000 coworkers, and and launching an NFT project was by far the most difficult thing I've ever done. Now, for us, it paved the way for what we hope to be a kind of a lifetime building in Web3, right? Like Joe and I are both in this space full time, so that was good. But the biggest thing I would say is, don't overinvest. I mean, Joe and I haven't taken one penny in profit. We had a one-time draw, and then we ended up paying that back to reinvesting that to help support some utilities. So, Joe and I have been working on this now for about a year, and I haven't taken a penny. Right. So we borrow. We paid ourselves once. I'd say we borrowed that money, and then promptly when Ethereum hit the shitter, promptly gave that back. So because that's what we needed to do. So I mean, I think that's the biggest thing is if you're in this to make a quick buck, those people don't last, and those projects will fail. Right. And we've seen that in the market. But if you're here to build something long term, and if you're solving a real need for people, the number one thing that the most flattering thing for me as a founder is when somebody comes into our Discord, especially in the beginning, and says, "I've never," like you said, Fanzo, right? I've never minted an NFT. This is my first NFT. Holy smokes, right? Like, wow, who am I, a kid from Quincy, Massachusetts, that co-founded a project that now this dude in Australia is, we have our community is about 50-50 national and international, which is also nice. Really cool to think that folks in Singapore and the UK and Australia and are really active members of our community. So I think the biggest thing is, I mean, what could we have done differently? I think our mint price is too high. And again, at the time it seemed fine. I guess we didn't really think about the long-term kind of impact, and we had sought out what I'll refer to as industry expertise in that from a couple different folks that had said, yeah, absolutely. No, you guys are good with your utility. Because we launched a an exclusively utility-driven project in an era where it was all 75 to 80% shitty art PFP projects, penguins and lions and llamas and all this selling out with no utility, right? So we looked at what the market would bear and what we were providing, and we're like, this is a premium project. Like, we're really providing a service here. To your point, you're talking to a subsection of a subsection of a subsection. And then the last thing that we didn't really see coming that was challenging is, again, we know a lot of people in poker, right, professionally. And you mentioned Chris Moneymaker, different guys that we know and gals that have different sponsorship deals or allegiances or contracts, right, that prevent them from, we play on GG Poker. So we have some friends that are in the ACR and PokerStars world that would perhaps be more involved, but can't be because they're under contractual obligations. So if they're seen, doing something, if you work for ACR, you work for Stars, and even though we don't, we just use GG as a platform, but still, so that was tough, right? That was like the politics of the poker world. Poker politics are unlike any other world, but
yes.
But my God, I mean, so I will say we were a little naive to that reality, because you go to, I go to a party, we go to like a poker party in Vegas with somebody like Maria. Well, everybody loves Maria because she's amazing and she's a Hall of Famer and one of the best poker players in the world. So just everybody loves everybody, and it's this amazing atmosphere of collaboration and camaraderie and telling bad beat stories and all that. But then you get to the business side of it, and it's like, okay, these people are professionals, and so that was a little bit of a bear trap, that we weren't really expecting. But like you said, live and learn, definitely.
And it's funny. So, I went back to look at my Twitter while you were saying that, I first tweeted out about the project early December. And then on December 28th, I tweeted out and was like, hey, I love that, Crypto Holdem is collaborating with CryptoDads. And I even put out there, keep an eye on this project. And I'll say, from my standpoint, I think it's easy for us to Monday morning quarterback a lot of things when it comes to hey, the price point and things. For me at the time, the 0.2 mint price did not high. I remember thinking, hey, we're right on the utility. I mean, also the design of the website, where things were going. You were already collaborating with other projects, right? You were, the proof was there. And, and I've shared this on the podcast. When we started in November, the average mint price was 0.06 to 0.08 Ethereum for projects. And, we had gone back, 2 months to kind of figure out, okay, because I was trying to figure out how much it's going to cost me to buy an NFT every day for a year. And I was like, well, they're going to, it's going to ebb and flow, but probably 0.15 will be the high. Well, of course, by the time we got through Christmas and New Year's, that had all changed, right? And it had gone in a way where every, for a while there, every project that was coming to me was 0.3, 0.2 to 0.3, where I was like, man, I missed my estimates of that. And I will also say though, that there's also a component where, I would say December, January, and probably even in the February, there was also a time of like, if your project wasn't at a certain a mint price, it almost was kind of like bucketed in with a lot of projects that didn't have utility and things. So I think it's really important for all of our listeners, right? Like how you look at this bring a project to life. Like you mentioned, like if you had launched in the fall, it might've been different. It probably would have sold out, but it probably would have had a bunch of people in there that were not caring about your utility and not believers in what you're building, long-term. And I want to tap into kind of the poker connection as well. But, Joe, the other piece of this, I believe you guys are still minting, right? As of right now. So people can, check that out. It's CryptoHoldemNFT.com. And of course, DYODR, do your own damn research. But, we're sharing a little bit on that side. Talk a little bit about like how the project has kind of morphed over, since the original launch. And I will also say I enjoy, the graphics that you guys bring as far as promoting. I think you do a great job of, putting the schedule out there. For those that haven't used Club GG, I have no association with them either, but I've actually been very impressed with the usability of that, iOS app for a poker app. There are a lot of, for anyone that hasn't played online poker or mobile poker, there are a lot of bad experiences for onboarding into a lot of these, digital, poker platforms. And I feel like that one, it does a great job. A lot of other projects are using it as well. Can you talk a little bit about what you guys have kind of added or what you've kind of morphed, since launch, and what people can kind of think about if they, want to jump into the project?
Yeah, absolutely. And go back to the February launch. I think, prior to that, we were doing a bunch of free NFT giveaways, crypto hold'em whitelist spots. And, again, this is for all the, the founders or anybody that's thinking about creating a project. I can tell you, we had a really, really large whitelist at the time. Like it was really big. And like, wow, okay, we got it. The niche of the niche of the niche. We found the poker community. We did it all right. We flipped that for the whitelist spots. And I think 7% minted. 7% of the entire whitelist minted. And we said, you know what? We're just going to keep going. It's a road. We're going to learn. We're going to go through this process. We're going to go to the minting page. But what came out of that are those people that minted off that whitelist are some of our strongest community members. And those are the people that are the mouthpiece for our community right now. And one thing that Josh and I have done, I think, pretty well, not to pat ourselves on the back, is we've always giving credit to people who've been with us since day one. We've created certain roles. We have certain roles for sharks if you hold a certain number of NFTs. We have roles for VIPs if you hold that. And we have an OG day one minting VIP role in Discord, right? And that's the Rounders. And if you haven't seen Rounders, we created that, right? So we gave these roles. And I think, the one great thing about our community, and I appreciate you saying that we have a strong one, is, we have such a good group of people from all over the world that just love to play poker. And talking about maneuvering in this space, changing the project, a lot of the ideas and a lot of the changes that we have made have come from our own community. Josh and I don't think we're the smartest people in the room. So we put a lot of polls out to, hey, if you're going to invest our project and you're going to hold 10 plus crypto hold'em NFTs, I wanted to know what I'm doing good. I want to know what I'm doing bad, and how can we better, maybe I'm not thinking about something of how I can reach a different, facet of the poker community. So I think, we're building day by day, but really that community aspect is something that I'm like, hey, if we didn't do it the way we did, maybe we wouldn't have those people that are so strong in the community right now.
Oh, I think 100%. I don't think it would have, and I think I appreciate the transparency on the whitelist side, because I remember, I don't remember where I was. I remember that day being like, I need to make sure that I'm minting right away, because from the outside, right, the hype there, the momentum from the what I felt like was in the Discord, the countdown. I remember the date being pushed, and I was like, wow, okay, now even building additional momentum on there, and I think the piece now. So for those that are jumping now, what's the collection at? What's the min price, and what can they expect from that side? And then I want to tap into a little bit of the poker synergy here for a minute too.
Yeah, definitely. So as far as the seller rate, so we're at 1170, right? So we have our total inventory is 9,282, and we've minted 1,170 of those. A lot of those, one of the fun kind of things. Sometimes you're shooting from the hip here, and sometimes, to Joe's point, you get good ideas from the community. One of Joe's great ideas, to give him a little pump his tires a little bit, give him a pat on the back, is he said, what if we do a MOGO? I'm like, what the hell is a MOGO? He's like, mint one, get one, like a BOGO, right? I'm like, okay, that's kind of campy. I don't know if that's really going to resonate with the community. So we're at NFT LA. We're at a hotel room in LA, like just grinding through, strategy. And, we have 10 meetings today and a conference at night. And, so Joe puts out this post and it went like wildfire, right? I mean, people really loved it. They loved the idea, and we minted a ton of units. So, and that's the biggest thing. When we launched our collection, our sell-through rate right now is about 13% of our total inventory, give or take, right?
Yep.
So, and that's after a big second push. We lowered the mint price to 0.1 relatively recently, right, to make the project more accessible. And this is actually before the crash. So we wanted to make the project more accessible and get as many folks involved in the community as we can. Prior to that, we're sitting there, we were looking at about 6.5% of our inventory we had sold through. And some of our total mints were buy one, get one, were mint one, were MOGOs, right? So how do we deliver on utility with 6% of our available funds, right? Because this is, we were following the industry playbook, right? Like, hey man, we go through, you mint this, you make conservatively between $1 and $2 million, and here's what we can do with that money, right? Like, stoked. I mean, so the fact that we just recently sent somebody, we had 2 people play in main events, right? We had one person playing an in-person event, 10K buy-in, all expenses paid, trip covered, played pretty well. He finished I think 300 spots out of the money. So
nice. That's real impressive.
Yeah, for as many people as if he cashed, I'd probably give you his name, but I won't upset him. But anyway, one of our community members, and he won a tournament to play, and then we had another one of our community members playing an online bracelet event too. So the biggest thing that we had to kind of change gears, and as a famous podcast host once said, right, if you don't change your course in this market, you're going to die, right? Your project's going to die, right? So I heard that somewhere. I don't know where I heard it, but. And we realize that, and it's funny that can be weird and painful for community, right? Because a lot of people aren't, right? And a lot of people aren't because a lot of these founders aren't doxxed, and there's a couple projects. I'm sure we're all members of one. I don't, not to FUD, so I won't say the name, but one of these monkey PFP projects I'm part of, the founders they're not doxxed, and there was so much negative chatter in the Discord, they just shut down all their channels to announcement only, and they're just, hey, we're doing the best we can, and we don't want to hear it. I mean, that's not us. You know what I mean, right? We're docs from Jump Street. We try to take accountability. So as we're going through and trying to iterate and change course, we said that we went out to the community and said, what's the most important thing for you guys? They said, we want to play poker, and we love the idea that we can go to the WSOP. Done. So we took all of our available funds, and Joe and I, like I said, in a year of work, each took one payment, right, for 10 grand. I'll just say it. Why not? Right. And then we reinvested that back in the project, because when ETH crashed, we looked at, cash on hand and said, we need to do this. So Joe and I each put that money back into the business. So like I said, we haven't taken we haven't made a penny, and that's okay. Right. Because that's my biggest thing. And our biggest thing as a team, as a core team, is we're here to do what we said we're going to do, which is give people a home to play poker and provide as much utility as we can, given now there's only so much money, right? So, and I'm okay working for free, working to be in debt's another matter, right? So, so that's really what we've come here to do. And so, but really the project is a slow burn, right? And we've never been a big FOMO. Oh, I saw this on this Shield channel. We hired this influencer. We know those guys, right? Like we know guys that know Snoop. We know guys that know, and a lot of these, Paris Hilton, a lot of these really wildly famous people. But that's, first of all, not free, and B, that's the holder's money. That's not our money. That's the biggest misconception in this space. Yeah, you see, like, oh, dude, like little Dirk and Gunna, and Gunna's in jail, but before he went away, all these
Mayweather,
exactly right, Mayweather, exactly. Like, that's a pretty big bag, and that's your money. That if you're a holder, that's your money, because that's the first thing that founders are going to do is pay that back, right? So that was an area, again, that's something we felt really strongly about. Like, guys, we're not doing that, and this is it's our money now, but it's going to become your money that we're spending. So I'm glad we held true to that. And honestly, it put us in a position where we're still financially able to send folks to WSOP and deliver on some of that utility. If we had that 50, 60, 70, 80, $100,000 bags hanging over our head for these shill channels that may or may not have worked, we wouldn't have been able to. We'd probably be out of business, honestly, had we done that. So.
Well, and I want to put something out there too, like, I remember, Joe, when you reached out and you're like, hey, I'm a big fan of the podcast. And I was like, to me, that was like holy, you don't know who's listening. And I was like, wow, I'm a huge fan of the project. Right. And I was, not only a fan of poker, but I loved what the project was building. I also loved the commitment to building from day one as a slow burn. And, I work hard at not making it pumping bags or about, talking about individual projects. But for anyone that's listening to this podcast for majority of the episodes, when I talk about slow burn projects that have utility that I believe is built and innovative a little bit before its time, but is the one that's going to be here for the long run. There are two slow burn projects. MetaWhips is one of them, and the CryptoHoldem one is the second one. And those two, so whenever I was saying those things over the last many months, for me, part of it was like, I'm proud of having it in our collection. I'm proud that, not only have you guys continued to deliver, but, the slow burn idea is that, you also have a great job of kind of onboarding new people into that, community. I think poker world as a whole, for those that love the NFT space of being very welcoming and very, kind of educational and there's some bad side, but there's definitely that wag me side. I've felt like that for poker for the longest of time, right? You would think that everyone was enemies on everyone, especially even playing, in person. And, I played out of Talking Six resort there out of Arizona for, many years. And my pictures on the back wall from the tables, the first 2 years, I actually final tabled back-to-back years of their, the Arizona State tournament. And I remember telling people people assume because your photos there or you're a name that there's an ego or reputation, but there's such a camaraderie around that. And I feel like your project has done a great job of kind of embracing that. And I think for our listeners, what I want to kind of always stress in the sense of when you're looking at projects to invest in and projects to follow the lead in or to mirror after, it's the ones that have utility, that are delivering, that are ultimately it's the right people getting into the project, right? And to me, this entire project is completely different. And I don't believe it's, a year from now, it's probably one that you're gonna be like, man, this was, the best. But I also think it's important that right now are tough times when, as much as I believe in slow burn, it's still a matter of hey, we got to keep momentum going. What are some creative things that, we can do to build some things out there? So the last kind of question I had, you guys have done a great job of collaboration, right? You have, events, you do, co-sponsored poker tournaments, for there are other projects that one of the things that I hear a lot is Brian, how do we prepare not to sell out? And I always say, my answer back is thank God you're asking that question, because the fact that you're willing to ask that question today shows that you're more mature in this space than a majority of where we were prior to, right? The fact that, 7% of your whitelist ends up, end up minting that, right? Or around that number. There's a lot of data or information or advice or influencer tips or hey, this is how many they had on the list, right? I remember hearing about Mechaverse, right? Mechaverse did the, raffle of 8,888 and there was 250,000 in the Discord. I was one of the ones that, got that raffle, and I also wrote it high, then kept it in my bag down to the floor. That's one of the ones that I still I got out at 1.2 ETH in January, and I felt like I was a huge win compared to that's at. But I commend both of you in the and the team, right, to commitment to the project, to continuing to deliver. But I also think this is where as current NFT holders, we have to be patient, and then also as those that are looking to invest in real projects. This is where real utility, real things matter. This is poker. If you're a poker player, you're a fan of poker players. If you're a fan of game theory, you're a fan of ways that NFTs can be used differently. I really appreciate what you guys have been building. So I say that publicly here just because for me, I was excited to have you guys on the podcast. If you would ask me in February, I would oh man, it would be a great project for me to bring on, and I'm very selective on the project side. So I'm curious, Joe, for anyone that's maybe on the edge, or what are some of the things that right now you guys are doing, or that they can if they buy an NFT now, what they get involved in, and then we'll kind of jump into that other part of the conversation.
Yeah, and just to add one point, for any of the founders that are talking about, maybe your project's not doing well right now, or you're thinking about doing just one thing, stay true to yourself, right? And to go back on your last point, is we've had a lot of opportunities come across our desks to maybe mint out, maybe, sell out some more NFTs, but that's not what we're about right now. This community is so strong, and to bring in, 1,000, 2,000 other people who don't really care about poker is not what our project's about. And quite frankly, and candidly, we've been approached by a couple poker projects that we don't see eye to eye with what they're doing. We're not all about cash games. We're not all about, pay money up front. We're a utility project, right? You buy our NFT, and this is what you get with our NFT. I'm not really interested, and I know Josh isn't either. We're not interested in creating a cash game on the internet and do stuff like that. If you want that, you can go play an ACR and play your cash games. Right. This is an NFT project. We've done it professionally since Jump Street. We created an LLC. Josh and I were very big on doxing and doing this the right way. So I wanted to hit on that point. Just stay true to yourself. And if you're hitting a road bump, you're just wag me, right? You're gonna, as long as you're true to yourself and you have the right utility and you have the right people in your project, you're gonna be fine. So don't give up and just keep going. And then I forget your other actual question.
No, yeah. So for those that those that are jumping in now, what are some of the, because I think you're continuing to build, but I think there's also a state now where if someone's buying an NFT now, what are some of the things they can be aware of or they can think about if they're jumping into the project?
Yeah, so we have nonstop poker twice a week. You can come in, and as soon as you mint the NFT, you can play in the whole. We have a holder channel where you can play poker. We have access to masterclass, and Josh is much more well versed on how. I think Josh has become a professional on masterclass, and a lot of our holders have access to that. And we're going to start qualifiers back up for the WSOP. Again, part of our roadmap is sending someone to the WSOP main event every year. And we're in the process, like we've talked about earlier, of changing things on our project. And I think if we're not changing or we're not listening to our community, then we're not doing our job as founders. We have a concept coming up right now. We're going to create a DAO and have, we have a ton of suggestions that come in daily, and we do read them all. And one thing is like, hey, we just want to play poker. And we were looking at an area of creating a DAO and allowing our community to dictate what they want to do with funds, whether it's IRL events. We sent a couple people to IRL events in Alabama and in Tennessee, North Carolina, excuse me. So we were like, hey, if you want to go play in IRL events and it's you're in the area, you can play in this tournament and you can play. So it's kind of cool just doing the IRL and the Club GG. So a lot of poker and our board reveals. If you guys haven't seen our board reveals, it's a really fun aspect. We have another one coming up later tonight. So yeah, it's our board reveals are something that we're really trying to bring more into the limelight because it sets our project apart from everything else.
It is really cool. And it took me a little bit to kind of wrap my head around it. And then once I understood what you guys are doing, I was like, oh, wow, this is a unique approach. And I'm excited for people to check that out. The other part of the conversation I just want to throw in, I mentioned this kind of pre-show, I actually lean in on a lot of, poker experience that kind of help in this NFT space. And one of the, there's a couple of areas like, for me, like I said, I was really bad at online poker until I started to figure out like, how do I transfer my skills, right? Like I'm great at reading people. I'm great at having conversations. Yes, Zoom would have helped in like the 2015 to 2018 range of poker. Like it would have been nice to have people on video, but like I started to understand like betting patterns, and I started to understand, even, the sizing of bets and how long people took to play on certain hands when we were, multi-tabling on, full tilt and Poker Stars at the time and kind of living that life. And it's so funny because like for me, a lot of those trends analysis, and when you look at projects and like how they're minting, how many wallets, like I'll look and say like, okay, that's cool that the project's minting a lot, but like who's minting it and what wallets, and are they all whales? Are they all wallets that were created in the last 24 hours? So there's a lot of like those pieces. But one of the biggest ones for me that I feel poker players have a massive advantage for is really that separation and understanding of like money on the table is different than money that is in your bank account or at the grocery store. And it is an issue here in the NFT space, right? Where you can feel like, hey, I'm minting things like, hey, it's a free project. I'm just paying $88 in gas. Yet, $88 is legit $88, right? And the fact that you're then going to have to go and be like, should I lower my internet? Should I get a different internet provider so I can save $100 a month? When at the same time you're throwing $88 at a free mint because you think Goblin Sister Kids project or whatever the hell it is might be something good. I'm curious your guys' take on like, because like to me that's an advantage. Like I can separate that because I would realize that I would sit down at a table with a 10K buy-in, and I would still recognize that like I have to pay the bills and I have to do things for like my family, where I can't just throw 10K at a chance to win a poker tournament the same way I throw like 10K around, on the outside as well. What poker skill, poker like that like experience do you guys see bridging kind of in this NFT space? Josh, I'll go to you first and go to Doug.
Yeah, no, I think, just to hit on what you're saying too about not selling out. I mean, there's a project WAGMI United we're big fans of, and
yes,
we're big sports guys. I mean, you look at the WAGMI United team, right? So that guy Gary V, he's pretty popular in the space.
I've heard of him before.
G Funk, Snowfro, G Money, Preston Johnson. Like, I mean, it's literally the Mount Rushmore of like dudes and ladies, guys and gals that are like wildly connected, knowledgeable in the space, influencers, whatever term you want to use, and they're still 2,000 minutes away from selling out. So I mean, literally, I minted 3. Why I started to get into it. I'm trying desperately to get into soccer because I've tried and failed a couple of times. I'm like, all right, WAGMI United, man, this is my team, right? This is so all of our entire core team minted this project, right?
Nice.
And I played cards with Daryl Moore a couple of times. Daryl's a buddy, right? So it's just like, and I saw he's attached to it, right? So like that's enough for me. And again, they haven't minted out. So if the question is, are we going to mint out? The answer is probably no. And it's about clearly communicating with your audience and with your community. Like, if we sell this, then we can do this, right? And setting different milestones, because in a poker related project, there wasn't really an incentive for our folks early on to encourage other people to mint, because the less hands you have, right, the better statistically your chances are winning, right? And,
yep, for sure.
Segueing into the question you asked, which is how do folks' poker skills, kind of tie in here? And I think it is, to your point, right now to mint, we're a 0.1 mint, ETH is wherever it is hovering around $1,000 today. So that's $100. Now $100 is $100, and gas is whatever. Thankfully, gas has been low, $5-10.
Yep.
So you look at like people that minted Goblin Town, or maybe they paid more in gas than it is for our token. And now it was a free mint, sure, okay. But it was because somebody thought it was somebody's cousin that maybe was related to Bored Apes and blah blah blah, and no flood in Goblin Town. They made a ton of dough and for very little utility, and good for them. Like, love that community, but wish we had thought of it. But just hating is what I'm doing. But that's the thing. Relatively, and we look at ETH on February 22nd, Ethereum was closed at 26.39, right? That was the if you look at the historical on it. In November, around November 2nd, when we're going to mint, ETH was at around $4,600.
Wow.
So I mean, that's a 57% reduction from our first to our second kind of minting season. So I think the cool thing about our community, and part of the reason why our folks are so loyal, is because they look at it and they go, okay, so how much did this cost me in US? How much did this cost me? Number one.
Yep.
So minted at 0.2 on mint day. It costs you $460 or something, right? Plus gas. Okay. So now you've gotten 5 months worth of, we play poker at least twice a week. So the hardest thing about being a poker player is what? Finding other people to play poker with, right? Like, get a game, unless you want to start getting into the non-regulated markets or traveling to a state where you can play online for cash, But living in California, where this whole idea was born, and now I live in Tennessee, like that, those are not legal online poker states. So the toughest thing to get a game. So I think the people recognize the value for money in that, even whether you paid $400 for this, whether you paid $100. I mean, shoot, you could buy one for right now and be part of our community for $50.
Right.
Our floor price is 0.05. Yep. And the best thing is, I had a conversation with another friend in the space yesterday. He said, what do you think about your floor price? So we don't care. So why not? Because it doesn't mean anything to us, right? Like, eventually, once we sell out, then that will mean the floor will start to rise. We know that because there's only so many hands, right? There's only so many memberships, right? There's only so many folks that can join the project, right?
Right.
So, but is there a scarcity when we've only minted 1,200 of 9,000? No, not yet. Will there be? Sure. And that's okay, right? And we're not dying to get there. I mean, do we wish we had sold a little bit more in mint? Definitely. But I think our poker people, can look at something pretty quick from a cost benefit analysis. And also, if you're a poker player and you spent between $100 and $400, $400 is not an insignificant amount of money, but how much did you spend on our project, and what has it given
Yep.
you? Right? You've been able to talk about poker 24/7, 365 for 5 months. Right? You've been able to play poker twice a week. You had an opportunity to qualify to play in the WSOP online event or in person. Right? We've given away over 250 NFTs through different collaboration tournaments. We bring a pretty decent. We had an ENS domain event the other night that shout out to Delaware Mike, who's our kind of alpha guy and just all around amazing dude. Set that up with the ENS guys, and like it was an educational event for our holders, because a lot of people that are in our community are brand new to NFTs and don't really give a crap about NFTs outside of the poker world. So, we bring education. Like Joe said, we had a partnership with Masterclass where everyone who's minted got access to a free month of Masterclass. And we did that because Phil Ivey and Daniel Negreanu have classes on there.
Yep.
So we know our core tenets at the beginning of the project were education, accessibility, right, and training. Right, we talk about like having all sorts of different abilities to win prizes, different abilities to have access to unique poker events, and to be able to educate, to be able to make you a better poker player. And how do you get better at poker? By playing more poker, right?
Yep.
So I mean, I'm really, really proud of what we've done, and I think that our community, again, I'm sorry I take the long way around always, but I think our community, our poker community, realizes that, and that's part of the reason why our community is so strong, is because they see it's hard to read the label from inside the jar. So sometimes, do we get a little blowback from, oh, what do you mean we're not doing $20,000 board reveals every month? I'm like, well, you look at Etherscan, you know how much we've made, right?
Right. Yep.
And that's what we love about this space. This space is really grimy and savage sometimes, right? Especially the NFT marketing space is brutal.
Oh, yeah.
What Joe and I have always said is we're going to use our powers for good. And what we love about this space is if you're not being transparent with your community, they'll be transparent with you. You know what I mean? Because it's all out there in the blockchain, which makes it beautiful. So,
and if I could just add on one point,
Yeah.
I think one thing we've done, and I'll give another shout out to Andrew Random, our poker operations, is he's had us on camera since day one.
Yep.
If we have an announcement to make to our community, we're not going to sit on Twitter Spaces. We're not going to record something. We're going to be on either Twitch or a Google Meet, or we are on video. And I think that's important for any founder or anybody who's thinking about starting a project. Is one, I think you need to be doxxed in this space. That's just my personal opinion. And two, if you're going to deliver something, whether it's good or bad, be on camera. Be yourself. One thing you hit on your podcast all the time is trust. If you don't have trust within your community, you're not going to make it. And I think that's one thing that we've done really well, is whether it's good, bad, ugly, every announcement that we've made has been on camera.
And I will say that stood out to me as well, right? And I think there's, when we look at, projects and not only, how people are investing or where things are going, right? Like, I think a lot of the FUD or even a lot of the disconnect in communication happens when, if the only time the communication is posted, good and bad, is in the Discord announcements channel, like that's such a disconnected way of us, like, kind of blanketly putting things out there. So I love that you guys kind of brought that up. And, I'll say for our listeners, like I knew, when we were, lining up this interview, I was like, this will be one of my longest podcast interview of them. Cause I love what you're building. I also love, the poker component, but I also think there's so many lessons here, right? And I brought up MetaWhips, and it's, a project founded by the West Coast Customs. And I said, I interviewed them the night before their mint, and they had a slow burn, mint, and they were, not only great people committed to the project, but they had the brand affinity, and they weren't willing to kind of jeopardize. There was lots of people and celebrities that were kind of approaching them, and they stayed committed, and they're, I love what they're continuing to do. And I got a sneak preview just over the weekend of their game and the things they're coming out. And I tie that here to this project, right? Because I think, not only have you guys doxed, but you have, brands, reputation, personal brands. I remember doing the research. Like I remember before we went into the project, right? I'm looking at each one of the founders, understanding like what did they have in play, and even like the association, friends with Maria Ho, who we've mentioned and shouted out, right? Understanding the market as a whole. And I'll also say just the other piece of this is like, the gamification to me is like the coolest part of all of the NFT space. Like I talk about Psychedelics Anonymous a lot here on the podcast, just because like there are things within the NFT space. Like I didn't even think of like these different like decision points that like all of our decisions impact everyone. It's very much like a poker table, right? Like the fact that, like we don't really have to, we don't have to beat everybody at the poker table. All we have to do is beat one person, and we're not playing against the house. And that's why I always tell people, like, I didn't gamble for many years when I was playing poker full time. I went and played poker. I didn't put it was 3 years of, full time going to Vegas every other weekend. And I didn't play blackjack. I literally did not touch another game other than Holdem. And for me, like that, like there's like a little bit like kind of like that commitment to, brand, commitment to, vision. And I'm excited to see where this continues to go. I also love like kind of the gamification of knowing what hands are out there and checking out OpenSea. And for those that are listening, right, like that, if you've listened this far into the project, like this is also a great example of where you can take inspiration for your projects and even opportunities for collaboration. And you mentioned that with like the ENS project. I love, like the masterclass piece, right? Like, not only is that a great utility, but it's beautifully tied to your, to the community. Because anyone that watches poker, you get Daniel on the ground, who the commercial comes on. I feel like I can almost quote him word for word on how he talks about a masterclass, and that's good. That's kudos to them. They know their market. They know, that we're watching like FSN1 at midnight because we want to watch like the deep stack all over again and what that might be. So I love what you guys are building. I love that you guys kind of brought this to life. Anything that you guys want to leave the audience with, anything to throw out there, we'll of course include the links. I appreciate you guys coming on. I'm excited to continue. We minted them for the project. I of course have one in my personal bag as well, and love to talk about future collaborations as well, because I really do love what you're building, and I appreciate the kind words and support of the podcast. Right, both of you have shared out the podcast over the time as well, and that means a lot to me. As a creator, I'm bootstrapping this project, right, and showing up every day for this this podcast, and we have an amazing team, but it's also one for me. Like, I believe in great people, I believe in great projects, and this is just another example and another opportunity I get to kind of bring this to life. So I'll kick it to you, Joe, first, and then I'll kick it to Josh, and we'll close it out.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And thanks for having us on. Like I said, I've been a big fan of this project, and to mint a project every day for 365 days, kudos to you, man. And kudos to doing a podcast every day. And there are people that are listening, and you're doing a really good job in educating people in the space. So I appreciate that. If you're a poker player, we got a great community for you. You can play poker. You talk poker, play poker. If you don't understand poker and you're new to NFTs, come over to our project too. Because, our board reveal process, we've invested a significant amount of money into our new table, RFID, where you can look at it, give percentages and stuff like that. We got a lot of cameras that are going on, and it's a good gameplay. So if you like poker, come over. If you don't understand poker and just like NFTs, come on over and check us out. Like you said, our Discord's always popping. We have a really strong community, though it's small. We're proud of that. And we have a really, really strong community. So I appreciate the time on the podcast, and thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Joe. Josh, over to you. Anything else you want to add on?
No, just the same. I mean, the board reveal process has always been pretty cool. That's kind of our secret sauce. And there's, like Joe said, if you're a poker player and you want to, if nothing else, tune into our Twitch, follow us on Twitch. So we're CryptoHoldemNFT on Twitch, on Instagram, and on Twitter. So follow us on social, check out one of the board reveals. I think you're going to love it. The production quality has improved dramatically. Will continue to improve. We're going to be doing a Q&A with, we mentioned his name earlier, but my boy Scott Blumstein, 2017 World Series of Poker main event winner.
Nice.
Q&A with him pretty soon, so look out for that. We've got some more collaborations coming. We actually did a collab with MetaWhips too in the very beginning.
Nice.
So shout out to those guys. We've got a couple of other projects, again, with Ethereum Towers and another project called Rogue Bunnies. That is a bunch of former playmates who have gotten together to launch a really awesome collection. They're going to be dropping some pretty major so their projects going places, and they're going to be have some huge announcements coming out. We're going to be doing a collaboration tournament with them. So if you're another project wants to do a collaboration tournament with us, reach out to us. We're happy to act as kind of a service provider for that. We're happy to have you as part of our community. And again, even if you just want to learn more about it, follow us on Twitch. Check out this board reveal. Shout out to Michael again, who's our chief poker officer, he's the guy that makes that engine go, and we wouldn't be where we are without him. But man, it's a lot of fun. We'd be honored to have you on board. And again, fans, thanks for having us on. It's been a great time, and definitely check us out on social.
For sure, and I'll make sure that all those links are in there. And you definitely shout out to Rogue Bunnies. I was actually in the like a 5-hour clubhouse room when they were kind of ideating the concept. And I'm a huge fan of the Playboy Rabbitars project, and I just was a lack of understanding of how all of that relationships went in the like the Playmate Playboy, like that whole world, and like that education, and then getting to know many of them. I know many of them listen to the podcast. I'm able to connect with them. That's a project that I'm excited for what they're bringing to life. We'll definitely talk more on that. And it's no surprise, right, that CryptoDads, MetaWhips, Rogue Bunnies. They're the other part of this like beautiful synergy is that like when you surround yourself with great people and great projects, you'll also discover great projects and other great people. And I think that is like one of those lessons that we just don't hear enough here in the NFT space, because like the byproducts of CryptoDads, like you might look at CryptoDads floor right now and where it's at the moment, but the amount of people that I've met that were either onboarded or that was like their first aha, like VFriends might have attracted people to the space, but you have to have that like that community that kind of welcomes you in and brings you to life. And I think for poker players, you guys have built that here for sure. And hopefully we'll get the get to play in person sometime too. I would look forward to that. And we are for me, I love online. I also think it's kind of that harmony. And the sponsor of our podcast here is the Crypto Business Conference happening there in San Diego, and that is another byproduct of in-person events. And what they're doing with Crypto Business Conference is not only you can do these tables where are based on the subject matter that you care about, right? If you're a dev, if you're an artist or a musician, you can sit down at networking tables where other musicians are gonna surround themselves with. And I think that is something that we have to be able to be better at in in-person events. And I love that the Crypto Business Conference is kind of pulling that together. And lastly, we'll give a shout out. We were talking about Sammy Arriaga a little bit pre-show. I have to give him a shout out. He was a guest on the podcast. We've minted his NFT with Digital Hearts, and he's hustling. I tell you what, for any musician that's out there, he has a project called Pixelated that is out there right now. That is another a great project, great artist. He shows up more than anyone I've ever met. I ran into him about 10 times in New York, and I felt like every time it was in between one of 5 gigs that he was doing every day of NFT NYC. And so that's just another example of a great person that's doing great things in this space. And you guys can jump back and listen to Sammy's interview. I pushed him in many ways, and afterwards he's like, "That's the most I've thought on an interview, but it was probably my favorite." And I was like, "I'll take that as a win." And so for all those listening, as always, do your own research. For me, this is a we is greater than me idea. And how do you surround yourself with great people? You find great projects, and poker pun. Go all in and let the cards fall as they may. But I think the beauty of this space is there's lots of great opportunity to get involved. So until tomorrow, make a great day, my friends. Cheers.